On the next episode of Painting and Travel, we'll follow Sarah along the Mississippi from Memphis to Natchez, stopping at famous Beal Street and the Vicksburg National Military Park, while Roger paints the river's bend from a high bluff.
Today, Sarah and I are in Natchez, Mississippi, and this, of course, is the Mississippi River behind us. We've come down from the area of Chicago, Illinois, tried to follow the river as much as we could, and this is one of the most beautiful spots we've seen because we're right up on a bluff, and we were able to park our camper right here, so it's been very convenient. And I love the nice curve of this river. So I've got my easel set up and I'm going to do a painting. What I'm going to do a little bit differently today is I'm going to make a long panoramic painting. Not too large, but quite long. I'm using acrylic paints today, and this is a masonite board, and I've just taped this off to my desired size. And here I have a glass palette. I have my little spray atomizers with me to keep my paints wet, and I have a small variety of brushes, mainly flat brushes called Brights. I think that's probably all I'll use today, maybe a pointed brush somewhere along the line to put in maybe a little bit of detail, although there's not much detail here. I'm going to tone my board, so I'm just going to spray this with a little water, get that wet. And I'm going to put a little burnt sienna on the board. And I'll just take a larger brush. I usually take a rag to do this too. But I can just tone this board with a nice warm color. Now it looks a little odd to tone this with such a warm color when everything here is so blue. But I think this might help me just give a little bit more warmth to this painting than I might otherwise get just by using, all these blue colors. So I'm going to put this on here. I think I'll wipe it off just a little bit because I don't want it too thick on there. And that just tones this board. That way I don't have to deal with this bright white color when I start to put my paints down. So I'll let that dry for just a couple minutes, and since that's acrylic, that will dry very quickly. And then as soon as that's dry, we'll start the painting of this Mississippi River. Well, I have all my paints out here now, and every time I paint, I seem to use a different set of colors on my palette. And as I just looked down the river, I just could see certain colors. And then I know what colors I have in my paints, and I just chose from actually visually looking at my subject. And I have here titanium white, cerulean blue, phthalo blue. Don't have much of that on there because it's such a very strong color. I have yellow ochre, chromium oxide green, and naphthol red. Now I'll use the red probably to dull some of these colors for the greens, make them a little darker, because of course red and green are opposite colors, so when I mix those two together I'll get a little bit darker green like that. Such a beautiful view of the river here. It's been amazing to us how much current is in this river as the boats travel up and down. Mostly barges carrying probably coal, all sorts of products. The actual river itself changes quite frequently, just the patterns in the river, just from the current. Well, I don't want to divide my canvas in half, and so since I'm focusing on the river, my sky, which is up at the top here, will have that sky stop right about in that area, because I don't want to feature the sky, I just want to feature the river. And dividing the canvas in half, if I divided it here, then two equal parts are never very interesting. So we'll divide the canvas up this way. I think I'll use a lot of paint here and get started just so I can cover this quickly. Speed is not a goal when I'm doing paintings, but often speed just helps create a better painting in some ways, because just not fussing with it and picking at it so intently. I can keep a little bit looser this way if I paint fast. I'm going to put a little bit of yellow ochre in this sky down here closer to the horizon. And since I'm using acrylics too, it'll stay wet on the canvas a little bit longer. So I'll just continue on with some more white and cerulean blue and just put this in here. Now I will be definitely going over this color here. Now I always carry with me a good set of brushes, and the last painting I did on location was a brand new brush, and it didn't get washed out quite as well as I wanted to, because I probably washed it out in a little bit of water that was dirty, and that point is now gone. It's still okay, but I'll tell you, if you don't keep these brushes washed out, they go bad pretty quickly, especially when painting outside on location. It's pretty hard to keep your brushes in good shape. So these brushes are a little bit stiffer than I would like them to be, but not too bad. I'm going to pick up a little bit of this chromium oxide green and some of the red, maybe a little cerulean blue. It's early morning here, so it's been quite nice. And since it is early morning, we have this beautiful sort of atmosphere between where we are here and the horizon. And all these greens and blues seem to be sort of in the same color range. So we're going to have no problem with creating harmony in this painting. This river sweeps around this way. As I get into it, we'll put some more trees down in here, sort of to make this composition have a little nice curve to it. As I look way back on that horizon, the color of those trees way back in the distance are almost the color of the sky. Just a little bit darker than the sky, but almost the same color blue. You know, as things go back in the distance, of course, they get softer. While this is still a little bit wet, maybe I'll spray it some and just soften that edge way back there. Now, I've tried to divide the composition here into thirds, which I try and do most of the time if it's all possible. So here we have the horizon about a third of the way down, and I divided the canvas this way by not having this in the center. It's not actually at a third over here, but it's close enough where the composition can be a little bit pleasing. I think if I had it over here, actually divided this canvas into a third, it would just get me a little bit too much going on over here, a little bit too heavy. So this is offset just a little bit, so we got the composition like that. It's a lot of barges going up and down this river, and maybe towards the end of the painting we'll add a little bit of a barge in there to put some kind of human interest into this picture. I love looking at this scene right now because the trees on the edge of the shore are just very blue when it comes into the shadow portions of them. So I'm going to pick up a little phthalo blue now, and as I look at that, I guess maybe a little bit of this chromium oxide and phthalo blue. I guess maybe a little bit of red too. Cut that back down and make it almost a purplish color. This is very dark shadows in here. By painting this early morning light with all this atmosphere, that's what I'm trying to capture here, is just a sense of the distance here on this river, because we can probably see down this river at least 3 or 4 miles. Cerulean blue, a little bit of white. I'm going to pick up some red here, trying to mix the color for these trees over here. I don't want to get them too dark. At the same time, I don't want to get them too light either. If I get them too dark, I'll lose that feeling of early morning atmosphere. Now over this side of the river, the light's hitting the trees a little more directly. So I think I'll warm that up just a little bit with some yellow ochre. Some very interesting houses around this area of Natchez. Hear a little cat fight going on over there. Sarah and I certainly have enjoyed driving around Natchez here. There's some beautiful old buildings and historic sites. And we've enjoyed driving down the Mississippi in general. In fact, I think maybe this is a good time to let this dry for just a couple of minutes and take you on a tour of some of the places we've visited along the river.
Natchez is one of the oldest towns in Mississippi and is rich with historic homes like the Rosalie Antebellum Mansion, fully furnished and open to the public. Other more modest homes, many with individual artistic character, line the streets around the city. Shops, bed and breakfasts, and restaurants fill the downtown area, where the smoked scent enticed us to this local favorite called the Pig Out Inn, where we found the tenderest barbecue in town.
10 years. And pulled pork. Oh, that looks delicious.
A little further north, we spent a rainy afternoon in Memphis, Tennessee, down by the riverboats. But a few blocks away was the spot where most of the activity takes place. It's the famous Beale Street, where cafes and clubs serve up a nightly buffet of the blues. This is also the hometown of Elvis Presley, and souvenirs of every description can be found in all the shops. Despite the rain, we enjoyed our brief visit to this most vibrant city. The mood was very different at our next stop, where we visited the Vicksburg National Military Park. 1,300 monuments and markers line the 16 miles of tour road that wind through the now peaceful hills. For 102 years, the ironclad gunboat Uss Cairo rested on the muddy bottom of the Yazoo River. It was raised in 1964 and is here with all her 13 cannons, along with many artifacts from the sailors who served on board. It now serves the country once again as an emotional reminder of our past heritage.
Okay, well, now I'm just going to continue on. This is a kind of an unusual perspective to be this high up above the river. There are many places along the river where, as you saw, there were a lot of levees. There's levees all along the river, but in a lot of cities you can't see over the levees very well. But here we're up on this beautiful bluff. Now I'm trying to keep these areas soft. Here the landscape rises up into some gentle little mountains here, or hills. I want to keep those kind of a blue color. I'm covering up most of this burnt sienna color that I put on there. And sometimes that happens. Other times that color shows through and really can help the painting. Other times you just sort of lose it all, but it's just part of the process. And, you know, painting is an unusual experience at best, because a painter can do painting after painting after painting, hundreds of paintings or thousands of paintings, and with no improvement, so to speak, realized. And then, for no apparent reason, One day I could be painting, for instance, and everything just goes right. And from then on out, I can take whatever that was, that undescribable thing, whatever that was that went right, and keep applying it to future paintings. So painting is almost like climbing a ladder, I guess. You know, you just go step by step, and sometimes you just get stuck on a certain rung for the longest time. So if that happens to you, don't feel bad about it. That's just part of what it is to be a painter. I'm going to spray this a little bit more with some water. I need to get a better atomizer. This one is starting to not spray very evenly. Now, as things get closer down here to the foreground, the color is going to intensify. As things go in towards the background here, everything gets some atmosphere behind it, so everything sort of narrows down in range and color and sort of becomes indistinguishable. But up here in the foreground, the colors will be a little more intense and the contrast will be a little bit greater. I'm going to start defining some of these areas a little bit better. My main goal here was to cover the whole canvas to begin with, just get everything sort of in position, hopefully the right colors in there and the right values. When I say values, I mean the difference between light and darks. So if it's a light value, it just means it's light. If it's a dark value, it just means it's dark, that's all. It can be any color, but value just means the lightness or darkness of an object. Now I've got those basic patterns in there. I'm looking way back here towards the horizon, and I think it's atmosphere I see right down by the water. It's not sand, although there is sand along the beach here or along the riverbanks. But I think right back there it's just atmosphere down by the water. It's a little light, so I'm just going to put that in. Now closer to the foreground, I can see the sand along the banks here. Add a little bit of that. Here again, I'll add some cerulean blue to this warm sand color of yellow ochre, because I don't want to go very far off my range of colors here. I want to keep this all pretty much blue. Here I see some patches of beautiful sunlight coming across the sand here. Here we've got a large tugboat coming up the river here. These just travel day and night. They just never stop. There's always some activity here on the river. I'll spray my paints a little bit to keep them wet, and maybe I'll clean off my palette. Got a little box here and a razor blade, and I can just clean that off easily. Put the paint in my box, and I'm ready to go again. Those tugboats really have to push hard when they're going upriver because of all that current in the river. I've never seen this during floods, but that must be quite a sight to see this river when it starts to flood. Now for all these variations in the river caused by the current, I'm going to try and indicate at least a little bit of that, because this isn't all just flat here. So I've sprayed my board, and even though this is dry, that water will let me flow this paint on the dry paint a little bit easier. So I'm trying to look at that color again. So cerulean blue, some red. I think I'll put a little bit of yellow ochre in there too, just to try and make a grayish color, but not too far different from the color of the existing water. I think it'd be fun to live on the river, watch these boats go by all the time. Well, this just gives sort of enough change in these river patterns, these water patterns, I think, to make it a little bit interesting. Well, those tugboats can really be loud. You can see how much water they're pushing behind them to move all that cargo. What I don't like about this painting so far is just the shape of these curves. I want to get a little bit nicer flow in here, so I'm going to work on that next. Probably should have established that a little bit better early on, but no problem. It's just easy to correct, especially with acrylics. I'm going to make the river up here a little bit wider. And maybe this can sweep around a little bit more this way. Yeah, that feels a little bit better. Sort of have this pattern leading my eye back to the background there. While that's still wet, I'm just going to try and soften that a little bit. As long as I've got a barge moving up the river there, maybe this is a good time to utilize that barge before it moves on any further and just indicate that barge. It's really one of the things that makes the river so interesting. So I'm mixing up sort of a grayish color, but I'm keeping it on the warm side, trying to keep in mind the perspective here on this barge, because even though this is small, this perspective has to end right at the horizon here. So we have those aiming themselves right at the horizon. And that leaves a bit of a wake behind it, indicate a little bit of a trail of where that tugboat went through, a little bit of a path. I think I'll put one more barge up here, and this is quite far in the distance, so I'll just suggest that. I think anybody that knows anything about the Mississippi River would understand that these are barges going up there, even though they're just a very simple indication of them. Well, this would be a good time to take a digital photograph of this scene here. So if I don't finish this here out on location, which I seldom do, I'll have a good reference picture here. Very important tool to have in my painting arsenal of equipment. It's always so exciting for me to come out here and paint. And my vision of what I'm going to paint most often exceeds my capabilities. I think in many ways I can see better than I can paint, because I'm always looking, I'm always seeing, but I'm not always painting. I have some really nice shadows from these trees coming down on the water here. Well, to finish this nice sweep I've got here of this composition, I need to add some of these trees in the foreground. And I want those to be fairly intense, so I'll take my phthalo blue, a little bit of this naphthol red, and some of this green, make up a very rich dark green color. I'll try and indicate a few of these trees down here below us on this bluff. I'm sort of dabbing my brush here, which is an okay technique, but it's got to be used with a lot of caution, because if that technique is used too much, it becomes like a gimmick, sort of an easy out for making leaves and branches. So I'm going to start with that, and then I think I'll soften it just a bit. And I'll pick up my small pointed brush and maybe just put a few indication of some branches in here. It's always hard to stop. You know, it's hard to know when and where to stop on a painting, especially on location. The light changes so much. It's changed quite a bit from when we started here this morning, not that long ago. And I have sat out on location for hour after hour, for 3-4 hours at a time, and painted. And by that time, I'm looking at a totally different picture, totally different scene. So speed, in some respects, painting on location is important. But I think I'm just about finished here on the banks of the Mississippi River. But it's so much fun, I just kind of hate to stop. Now maybe if the sun were a little bit different, I might get a nice patch of sunlight way back there. And I keep going back to this little area. This fascinates me quite a bit. And I'm just going to make this a little bit lighter. Mix up a little bit of the sky color again, cerulean blue and white, a little bit of yellow ochre. I'll make a few little sky holes in here. For those trees in the very distance there, I'm going to mix up a little bit of phthalo blue and white. And just work on those a little bit more, just to put a little bit of pure color back here. Ooh, bring my eye back there, just a little bit more. Ooh, I like that. Well, Sarah and I certainly enjoyed being here in Natchez, Mississippi on the Mississippi River. It's been a great morning. Everything has cooperated with us. So I think I'll take this tape off now. See what this looks like. There's more that I want to do to this painting. And Sarah and I will continue our travels to some more interesting places. But for now, I think I'll call this quits, and we'll finish it back in the studio. I'll put a few more finishing touches on it, a little more detail here and there. I'll varnish it, sign it, of course. We'll put a frame on it, which always makes all the difference in the world, and we'll see what it looks like.
For more information about painting and travel with Roger and Sarah Bansemer, visit paintingandtravel.com.